You got any oh.
Come and seek on in it by the one file. If you want, you've paid it.
Welcome to the Tora Podcast.
Welcome, everyone. This is our first trial, I guess, first episode 1.
First installment.
We pretty much
time coming.
Yeah, I guess we should explain why we even are doing this.
Yeah, why we're here.
Basically, we wanted to set up a space for us because we just love having conversations and talking about interesting stuff. And we wanted to bring ourselves closer to the fans and kind of give people a bit more insight into our personalities and our other interests. And especially at the moment, we're in different places and we're kind of all going through some creative growth on individual levels and getting ready for basically making new music next year. But in the meantime, while we're in different places, we wanted to maintain some sort of connection with each other and with the audience, with you guys.
And other creatives as well, like other musicians. And we'll probably have, I guess, guests. And sorry, my phone's bloody going off. Have guests on maybe other musicians or friends of ours or other creatives, maybe other podcasters, artists.
Yeah. I think at this stage, pretty loose format. I think it'll evolve over time.
Yeah.
Sorry, Jai.
It will evolve over time, and we lost Joe. But I think that one of the main goals is to give you all really a clear idea of who we are as individuals and why sort of we are a band, and sort of expanding on our personal interests, and just so you can get a bit of a look into us as people and as a project outside of the context of on stage, or, more like a living room, like you're sitting in a living room with us. And I think that's really what we're going for. And so, it's going to be interesting to see what discussions we have. And I think you guys will enjoy it, or maybe not at all, but that's fine too.
Yeah, 100%. I think fly on the wall kind of stuff, because this is pretty interesting, but we've sort of been a band now for about 10 years. And I think it's coming to the point where, as Joe mentioned, we're sort of taking a break. We're kind of growing individually, focusing on some personal stuff too. Not to say that the band is actually taking a break or on hiatus. We've just kind of decided to, take a moment to explore some personal things. But with that said, we have experienced so much together. We've seen so much together. We've done so much together. And I think a lot of the experiences that we have come to form together, there's actually a lot of value we can share with the community as well, and with other people. And I mean, I think just generally as well, it's just so much fun to kind of chat, because as well as being bandmates, we're all sort of best friends too. And I think that's something that isn't shared across many bands that at least I've met. Because, I guess we can kind of dive into the history a little bit. We did have a few people asking us to touch on that. And maybe good for this first installment to kind of give a bit of an overview of how we even became a band, how we all met, and everything like that. So,
well, I think also this space is there so that when people have questions for us and things that they want to know about us, we can bring that up in each podcast. We can compile questions that come in on social media that you guys ask us.
And also we're pretty rubbish with keeping a social media presence, or engaging with fans on TikTok or Instagram. So maybe this is kind of a more open, long format style for us to be able to connect with people, and just saying, with questions and stuff, without it being us, especially when we're not in the same city or the same country or whatever, for us to be able to still connect and not feel like we've just dropped off the face of the earth.
Yeah, and I think also it could be a really interesting way for us to bring our audience into the creative process a bit more. When we're sharing ideas with each other from a distance, whether it's some demos that we're working on, it could be a way to almost just get some preliminary feedback on ideas from the fans, and see, help people get an idea of how we actually create, and also just bringing in our friends who are in the music industry, and maybe not just in the music industry, but people who are want to share their music and their perspectives and their process, like friends of ours that we've had as part of our journey. I think that's all going to be relayed to the audience over these podcasts. So yeah, I'm excited for that opportunity to actually engage with our fans.
So on this note, actually, a little bit of housekeeping. Are we going to be going for like a NSFW kind of approach? Are we going to be swearing? Are we going to be trying to be a little bit more diplomatic? Like how do we kind of want to actually approach this? Or
it's a good question because
living room.
No, but
cool.
At least 80%.
But it comes down to like, I guess the platforms will be going on. So I think most platforms are fine with swearing. Like Spotify is fine. I think where you come into issues is maybe YouTube and stuff.
No.
Or certain ones, maybe Instagram with like monetization.
I feel like they should say like
a
foot if they do that.
I think swearing's fine. As long as it's nothing that's like...
I guess we'll find out anyway.
Anyway, it's fine. I'm just saying it doesn't really matter. But I think, it doesn't really matter in terms of that. It's more or less comes down to like certain platforms. But most of them are fine with it anyway.
Well, why don't we move on to where everyone's at right now and like and what we're up to
it's a good place
in those places. Like to start off, I'm in Barcelona. I'm here for another 2 weeks actually, and then I'm going to be flying back to Australia for a bit of summer. And right now, I'm basically just working on my instruments and sort of enjoying the last bit of my time here before heading to Australia for family times and Christmas and New Year's and. Actually also planning to work on a solo release over that period in from like December to March kind of thing. So that's exciting, and it should be nice to bleed out of that process into hopefully new work with Tora and a new record. Hopefully.
What are you going for, the vibe for this release?
Well, so that's sort of something you have to work out, but like because I've spent the last year playing a lot more piano than any other instrument and a lot more than I've been producing or doing anything really. I think there's going to be quite a strong like sort of emphasis on that being a foundational layer. So I think I'm just going to build up from there, taking into account the previous releases and like what I've done previously, but not, handcuffing myself to that by any respect. But anyway, I'll let you guys say where you're at.
Yeah. Well, I'm currently in Switzerland in the studio that we built here earlier this year at a friend's place, Dali. And I've been here for a couple of months now, just chipping away at some new music. I'm also doing the same as Jai, just having a crack at some solo stuff. And I think it's been really helpful for me to have kind of like the creative boundaries lifted, I guess. Sometimes working on Torah tracks can be like, because we've established a sound and a vibe, it's easy to like trick myself into thinking that it needs to be a certain way. And so working on the JPL stuff has been cool for me because it's kind of like there's no expectations. There's nothing that people are expecting to hear, or no one's going to be upset if it's not a certain way. So it's been cool for me to do that. And I'm getting to the point where I've got some songs which I'm going to release next year. So I'm excited about that.
That's good.
But yeah, in general, it's been really cool because Toby's been here as well. I don't know if you guys know, the audience knows, but Toby is the guy that used to sing in Torah and was one of the main songwriters in Torah for the early releases that we put out up until Take a Rest. And so we haven't really done anything together for 5 years. And then it turns out he came to be in the same place for a bit. And so it's been really interesting dynamic to kind of like work on our solo projects next to each other in like a different way. And I think it's brought us together in a weird way, like not being clashing creatively, but more like assistive.
It's really interesting to hear that.
Yeah, and then
I noticed that as well, being there, like just sort of seeing that dynamic unfold a little bit with all of us, just like having very little pressure, but kind of just like jamming a little bit or like just hanging out It's kind of like was a nice way to sort of rekindle that creative energy between at least the most of us, and just see what that felt like, which was interesting. So we'll see where that leads. Leads.
Yeah, well, I'm excited because basically, like, where we got to with the conversation since is like Toby's kind of interested in potentially getting involved in the next Torah record, which I think all of us are probably pretty excited about because we all know
spoilers. Perhaps we'll see.
Spoiler alert!
how creative Toby can be, and I think it'd be a huge addition to anything we work on.
No, I think that's really cool. And I think it says a lot about just how much we've sort of grown as people as well, because I do remember when we had just finished Take a Rest, and there was a little bit of, well, actually not a little bit, enough of interpersonal band tension to kind of like, for Toby to sort of want to step aside. But I mean, I won't speak too much for him, but you know, it's kind of insane just how much we do grow as people over time. And I think it's really, really cool that we can actually kind of get back together and the vibes are still there. And I think that actually says a lot about just sort of who we are as people and just sort of how we like to interact with one another creatively. And I think it's actually really special that we sort of have that as a band, and we have that in our friend group as well, because usually like ego can get in the way, and then like pride will just never allow something to re-galvanize like that. So yeah, it's really, really cool. Shawnee, whereabouts are you?
I'm in Berlin. I moved. I was in Amsterdam, and 2 weeks
You moved
ago,
out here? Moved out of Amsterdam?
It was super weird. I literally moved. Well, because the bed at my place wasn't mine, so I didn't really have any like furniture. Really, I sold the desk and chair, and everything else was like I had my little 3/4 bass and my clothes. So I had 2 suitcases, a backpack, and my bass guitar, and then just caught a train to Berlin. So it's pretty sweet. And it was like ultimate. It's like a little backpacking sort of experience. It's kind of humbling when you can fit most of your belongings in, 3 bags and just be able to like move around. I catch a train.
Very versatile. Very versatile.
It's it was like, it was nice, but then I was also like, well, I guess I have a bunch of stuff in Australia still. But here I realized how little, I guess, like belongings or shit I had just laying around. But yeah, anyway, I'm in Berlin now. I've been catching up with artists. A friend of mine, Ozzy.
Is he in Berlin?
Yeah, he'd been living here for a year. He actually just moved back to Amsterdam though. We literally just went.
Oh really?
Switched. Okay. But he introduced me to a bunch of musician, DJ, producer guys that all live in a house together in Mitte. And they're legends. Ray, he runs like an indie label that's got that has Ozzy signed to him and a bunch of other sort of indie electronic artists. So been catching up with those boys and kind of getting into like, I guess, a little peeping into sort of like the Berlin music scene that's not just hard techno, I guess. Because there is a lot of that here, but there's also a lot of other things going on if you look deep enough. And then also I've been, I guess, working on the sort of mixing. I can't really say too many things right now because they're not released or whatever, but working on other people's. Funny enough, I'm on a podcast and I'm working on other people's podcasts. So like podcastception. So that's been fun. It's kind of different, like being able to stand behind the sort of curtains, I guess, in a way, not being at the forefront of like having to create the content or being part of the image of the content, but just being able to be behind the curtains or whatever, and working on the mixing and the sort of technical side of stuff like that. And then hopefully moving into sort of like a bit more studio work and things like that once I can establish myself more here in Berlin. I was looking at doing that stuff at Stamped, but after the decision of moving to Berlin from Amsterdam, it made it a bit more difficult to keep that going unless someone comes and slaps down a fat stack of cash and wants to go do a studio session.
Do they not have any like affiliated studios or partners in Berlin?
Not really, because that studio. Well, I guess they would have like mates that would work at different studios, but they're much more like very, how do you say it? Because they have a record label, publishing, and a studio, so they're almost like this one unit.
Right.
And so, you know, I'm sure they have like some sort of connection to studios and stuff here, but there's not so much like an affiliate program type thing with them. I think they've only been open for, I think, 5 years or something. It's still a very, very new studio in terms of like the, you know, music scene, record scene. But yeah, it's a super nice place. Who knows? I'll be back there soon, I'm sure.
Where you at, Thorn?
So I'm in the Big Apple, New York City at the moment. It's pretty good, pretty cold, but I have to say, compared to Amsterdam, it's actually blue skies and cold. There doesn't seem to be a lot of rain here at all, although some of the locals tell me otherwise. But from what I've experienced, it's just like, beautiful blue sky, very crisp air, but very, very cold now. But looks like it'll be getting a little bit warmer soon. But yeah, I'm here working with a project called the Unit Network, which I'm co-founding with a few friends. It's kind of like a tech crypto company startup. Basically dived in to work with these guys almost like 2 years ago now, actually, which is kind of insane. But this kind of hinged off a discussion I was having with Joe about tokenizing our record label and potentially tokenizing Tora as a band. And for those of you that don't really know what tokenizing is, it's kind of like an opportunity to bring a community closer to a creator, you know, where we can kind of bridge the gap and we don't have to have so many middlemen or intermediaries, and we can kind of have a more intimate relationship with fans or community members, and they can kind of like share in certain pieces of ownership. They can get access to certain bits of content, whatever it is. Like the whole space is very young, super emergent, but yeah.
It brings to an interesting point. It's like, I think one of like the talking points and like discussions we'll be having throughout as a theme throughout this podcast will be sort of touching on the future of the music industry as we see it potentially, and like where there are issues and how things can be improved, and like tips for even other creatives who, you know, are new to the space and are trying to understand the complexity, and, you know, because it's a very complex industry and a lot of people don't realize, I think, how much there is to it that you need to sort of have covered. And we've learned slowly but surely over 10 years how much there is. And I really think that we can provide some great insight to creatives who want to enter the space, but also just anyone who wants to know how the music industry works or wants to get into the music industry as a non-creative. There's a lot of information that we'll be sort of giving to you as listeners throughout this podcast, and you know, and how that information and in regards to the industry might relate to stuff like crypto or, you know, even politics or so it should be an interesting point.
Exactly. And I think it's like a very emergent space. I mean, the music industry itself is undergoing a bit of a paradigm shift or like a revolution in terms of how technology actually interfaces with what's happening. And I think the music industry, because there's so many legacy systems and institutions built around it, I think it's one of the slower moving or slower evolving systems as well. So I would forecast that within the next sort of 5 to 10 years, things are going to be getting very, very interesting. And at least for the artists, I think they're going to be feeling a lot more empowered. They'll have faster access to capital.
Do you mean in
royalties.
terms of like Web3 type, like
Web3
like
stuff,
implementation?
But even just like using, like using blockchain for royalty accounting and all of this kind of stuff. Like if we can get all of the main DSPs to actually align and kind of, you know, share information more freely and faster, I think what really should happen is someone streams a Torah song and it's like a royalty is generated and gets distributed and sent straight to a wallet. And like the technology exists for that to actually happen.
Yeah, instead of that, it's like for those who don't know, it takes about, I would say almost a year to actually receive those funds.
Sometimes even more.
Sometimes I've been
sometimes 5 years. Sometimes you never get paid.
And it's crazy. And it's like, I don't want to be one of those guys who's, you know, constantly bitching about how painful the music industry is, because there's a lot of pros to the whole thing. But I think it's not to discount the fact that there's a lot of improving that can be done. And I think it's exciting.
I think the barrier to having well-oiled machine, so to speak, right now. It's like a really high bar to get there. So like we might sort of see us at a point now where like the systems that we have are like pretty well stuck in place and they work well. But like I think as a newcomer to the industry, a new artist or whatever, you know, trying to work out all those systems and like build them up so that they will work for you is like, it takes a really long time. And I really want to see that change. So like I really would like to see the difficulty of getting things happening smoothly be minimized. So that's just way easier.
I think that's why most people default to like, you know, a major label deal or something like that.
Which is part of the problem.
You literally just chill and make your music, and then you don't have to think about your distro and your publishing and your touring and fucking pretty much everything.
Royalties.
Which can work amazing for some people, but it can also be detrimental to other people's careers. And
without
creative,
casting shade,
everything.
There's like pretty much every artist who I know who's on a major label is not happy with it. So that kind of like it shows that the business model is not fair for the artist, or at least, I mean, that's kind of subjective because as the artist, I have a bias, but from what I've seen, a lot of the time people in major label deals are getting really unfair rates and are just not happy with their label, and as soon as the hype dies down, they kind of just get ignored by their label. And so it's not really sustainable for an artist to be in that kind of setup in this new industry, in the new world, the digitalized era where we have streaming and algorithms that basically feed your music to people. Artists need to rely less on massive budgets and marketing campaigns, and can actually get a lot done with a small, agile team. And I think that that's what's really exciting about this this tech boom that we're in. And I think it's going to continue to go in that direction where we're empowering the independent artist to have control over their works. Because what we see is that most artists traditionally would sign record deals, and then the label owns those works, and the artist is going to get paid for maybe a decade, and then eventually the rights revert to the label and they have nothing. Whereas the business model that the independent artist takes on is they record their own works and then they release them and they own them so that they can keep control of them and keep benefiting from them for the rest of their lives. And I think that is a lot more fair in the sense that the artist is the one who's creating the assets.
If I am to play devil's advocate here, I think there's many roads that lead to Rome, you know. And I think one thing that I have seen is even if an artist is initially unhappy with like a major label deal, they do still get the benefit of like an enormously powerful and influential network. And so when they do leave contract, they've already got an established fan base. And I think that community, if the artist is wise with how they kind of re-engage them and keep them, you know, in sort of the process and following the music, it's very possible for an artist to still be independent after a major label deal and have great success as well.
For sure.
So, I mean, and this is the other thing as well. I think, I've been listening to a lot of podcasts sort of around this changing world order. Like, I'm not sure who here knows Ray Dalio, but he's put out like a pretty amazing book and a really good like YouTube video as well. Anyone can go check it out. But one thing he's really talking about is these different sort of layers that get built on top of existing systems and structures. So, for example, we have like the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, and these guys have no fealty to anyone. You can't elect them, you can't fire them. They basically just are in charge of every single thing that goes into your mouth or onto your body. And so they're an enormously influential agency, and because of this, it's not really possible to reform them. And the same thing exists for the sort of monetary or financial system, and I think the same thing is almost true for the current music industry. And so rather than going in and trying to reform and to protest and to sort of like try and break the thing, the best alternative is actually to just make a new alternative. It's to exit.
Well,
and this is
what Apple did exactly with streaming, with iTunes streaming, right? They didn't wait for like the music industry to do it. It took like a tech company that had nothing to really do with music to like completely reimagine how do we consume music. You know, from CD shops to now having DSPs, where like before that, you know, you used to go buy your CD at your JB Hi-Fi, and then people would, you know, upload them to like think platforms like LimeWire or Napster or whatever. And then, you know, and then they were saying, well, the music industry is dead. Everyone's just downloading music now. They're not going to pay for it. How do we save this? And Apple was like, well, excuse me, how about we just make it accessible? How about we just make a streaming thing? And they said, oh, well, no, they won't help. They're still going to download it. Man, tell me anyone now that would actually bother.
Maybe a DJ.
And
only DJs.
Maybe,
I swear, only
maybe
DJs.
a DJ. Okay, but that's different.
Well, you have to. You actually have to as a DJ.
You got these catalogs. You got these thumbsticks. But I mean, for consumption, like just your everyday Joe that's just wanting to listen to music on their iPhone, they're not going to go upload music to their iPhone.
It's just not practical because, like, at the end of the day, we do have like so much data to store in our devices.
Yeah,
and
you
like,
imagine all that music if you wanted to keep it on your phone. It would
crazy.
It would never work.
Yeah, because back in the day, it'd be like we had like 10 bands you liked, and you had like
Yeah,
three
just
albums to
rotate
read, and that
CD.
was it.
Did you
But like,
ever have that
CD
experience
stacker
though?
in your car, and it's like, dude,
Like on your
experience.
iPod or like your iTunes, the amount of songs you had was like a flex. Like,
Yeah.
and how well
Yeah.
ordered
Like
they were, and did you have
2000
the album artwork and this whole
it
thing?
was
Man.
it was
I was so into that.
I was into that as well. I used to love my little fucking blue iPod, or like I had so many different ones, but like the generations and the evolution of that technology is just such an interesting thing to reminisce about.
I think I still have a 30 gig one at home somewhere.
Well,
Yeah,
the thing
30
that's-
gig would have been so boss back
that
in
was
the day.
like the nice big shiny one. It was like,
The thing that I find exciting about streaming and even things like Shazam is it really gives us an insight into the kind of people who are listening to our music and who are interested in our music. And it kind of creates this almost like two-way relationship with your fan base or with your audience, because you're actually seeing which ideas get more love and which ideas don't work and like people don't understand. And I mean, look, to some degree, the artist is the one who it's like what matters most is that the artist is happy with their work. But there's no denying that the way that the audience responds actually impacts the way that you end up feeling about those works. And it's been super interesting for us. I think it's been a big part of our evolution is like, because we basically started in the streaming era. And that was like a big part of what helped us develop our sound was on SoundCloud, putting up songs and seeing like people's comments and seeing which ideas or which styles were resonating most with the online community. And I think that actually impacted like the way that we make music and the music that we ended up releasing over time. It's like because of that, because of streaming, like it's changed the way we make music, I would say.
That's very true. Why don't we take a step back though and just kind of give people who maybe don't know us as well, or like people who do know us but don't know the story, like a little bit of insight into how we know each other and how we met and why we became a band. Maybe Joe, I'll let you take the reins on that. to start.
Well, it goes way back. It actually goes all the way back to when Sean and I were 9 years old. I'd moved from London, where I grew up, to Australia. Close to Byron Bay. That's where we all grew up, actually. And I went to a new school, and I met Sean at this Steiner school. It's like a very hippie school where everybody, like, you wear bare feet in the classroom when you're kids.
it's actually fucking true. I
climb
fully
trees.
forgot that.
You climb
I'm
trees.
so used to wearing shoes now. I legit used to take my shoes off to go into class. That's wild.
Wow.
I fully forgot that.
I mean, it was a Rudolph Steiner school. So,
But it was
it's
a pretty
nice wooden
lax
flooring,
one.
so you don't want to fuck with that.
It was,
pretty
but
nice.
very heavy emphasis on the arts and on personal motivation as well.
Yeah.
I think not to diverge too much, but a lot of the people I know that were there from the beginning until the end didn't appreciate it as much as people who came sort of halfway and had experienced other schooling systems. Because when I arrived from New Zealand, I arrived from like a private school where I had to have a tie and like suspenders to hold my socks up. And next thing I'm here and everyone's just running around barefoot, shirts off. It's just
Doing
like
eurythmy.
outrageous, man. And I had a bit of I had an interesting moment fashion-wise.
We
for a
did
couple of
yoga
years.
and eurythmy like in the mornings twice a week or whatever. Like it was definitely a different type of education. But anyway, the point is, Sean and I met in year 3 when we were 9 years old. And I think maybe the year later we started our own band with a few of the girls and boys from our class. It was like a blues band or something. And then so we were kind of playing music together for a while. And eventually, after having 3 or 4 different band names, we had like a high school band with Toby, who was also one of the original members of Torah. And when we were in high school, I actually had a really significant experience. My oldest sister's boyfriend was my guitar teacher and my mentor, and he died in a car crash when I was 13. And when that happened, I basically just decided that music was my destiny, and I wrote my first songs and just got obsessed with it. And in that process,
because before that, Joe, you were like the
player.
Ronaldinho of our school, pretty much.
I was playing soccer like
soccer,
7 times a week, 2 hours a day for like
literally
14.
Played soccer in his sleep.
Yeah, nice.
And I was like, I'm never going to drink alcohol. I'm never going to smoke weed.
Until that fateful evening.
Wrong.
Left an age, bro.
Oh, yeah. And then Jai was the younger brother of Sean and my best friend, Che. We were like the 3 musketeers, kind of getting up to mischief all the time. And Jai's dad asked me to teach him guitar. And so I did. Probably started teaching you when you were like 10 or something, Jai, right? 10?
10, yeah. I was 10.
We were like 15 or 16. And that kind of went on for a little bit. And I actually was like super impressed because Jai's just like naturally such a talented person, picks things up really easily, and he was really enthusiastic all the time. And I moved to Melbourne, and Thorn was also at our school, but we never really connected at school. But when later I moved to Melbourne and I was working in a call center, and I ended up one of our friends got Thorn a job at the call center, and we reconnected.
Che, actually.
Che, exactly.
Che.
Jai's
Yeah,
brother.
bumped into Che at some
Just a
bar.
pivoting point through
He's
this
like,
whole...
man, I'm at this place, I'm making stacks. You should come get a job. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds great.
What do you do?
You sell electricity.
That's so funny. And then it turns out that there were like, what, 5, 6
There was
people
like
from
10.
our school, or like 10 people from the area?
I literally got like 10 people jobs at that point.
So funny.
So ridiculous.
But anyway, so Thorn and I were like connecting at that workplace, and each evening we would all go like for beers, or after work we'd have beers, and we were like, how are we going to get out of this job kind of thing. And eventually Thorn and I decided that we wanted to set up a company that was going to basically revolutionize the energy industry and start like decentralizing power stations and all this stuff. Anyway, we ended up moving back to Byron Shire, and I started teaching.
You guys were way ahead of your time, basically.
Pretty much.
Yeah, we were like 10 years too early for the regulatory like hurdles. We
Yeah.
I
learned
think
that
you
the
were
hard
good.
way.
It's just that guy just fucking slayed you. Because you tried to undercut him. You tried to steal his clients.
Yeah.
So
We
he
were
just fucked
18.
you.
We didn't know anything about business, and we learned the hard way. But anyway, long
Tried
story
to
short.
Shark a shark, dude.
Yeah,
it was
we
amazing.
got pretty sharp. Anyway,
Anyway,
it was a good experience.
Long story
though.
short,
Really
It was good.
we moved back to Byron, and I started teaching Jai guitar again, but it quickly developed into more of like a songwriting relationship. Like he came around and started recording stuff with me and Toby.
Yeah.
And then suddenly we had a couple
I
of
think you guys were
tracks.
kind of teaching me
How to produce.
more like production.
Yeah.
Like showing me the ropes, some programs, and like I was learning production, and then we were starting to write songs together essentially.
Exactly.
And some of those songs kind of came out. Actually, one of the first songs that's not actually on any streaming platforms, but like we wrote a song called Captivate as like me. I think it was me, Toby, and Joe, and I was going to put that out as my first song under a solo project, but then we just feel like, fuck it, we'll just put it out as Torah. And by that point we had already put out Unobtainable as like you and Toby had written that and just chucked it on SoundCloud. And that was when Torah was called Torah's New Coma, and we then cut it down to Torah. And then when everyone was back in the Bay, we were like, sweet, let's play some music. And
Remember the
that's
first
basically
concert?
The
first concert.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we played at my grandma's library.
At your grandma's
the
poetry
library.
club in the library.
Yes. Yeah,
There's a
and
video. There's actually a video,
there's a video
online.
on YouTube, right?
Go on YouTube and search Tora cover Matilda. I think, or Alt J cover.
Yeah, we did Alt J.
Matilda.
And dude, the
Tora
one I
song.
want to see is the first one
It's
at
really
the
not that
Northern,
bad.
dude.
Bro, my
with
brother's
Joe
got
playing those electric drum percussion thing. I think
Was that with Sticky
Keegan's
Fingers? That was with Sticky
Yeah,
Fingers.
bro.
Who filmed that?
My
Someone
brother's
filmed
got
that.
the footage of that, and there's just
Oh
this like
my God.
wonky electric drum kit
It's
on
falling
stage,
over.
and Joe's just going
The
at
sticky
it,
fingers
trying
were
to, like,
ripping into us
open
so
up the-
hard as well.
Sticky must have just been
No,
like,
but-
who the fuck are these
What's
guys?
that-
Do you remember
Was
Dizza
it-
rocked
was
up with
Sticky,
a
right?
punctured lung?
Pretty
It was
sure.
like
yeah.
the first time
Oh,
we
yeah.
met them, and then like
Yeah.
Dizza rolled in with a punctured lung and was just like
He's just lying on the
not
couch.
stoked.
But it was also
Joe's just setting
like
up his-
Rascal were there as well.
Yeah,
Pretty sure.
it
And
was
then we
three
did
three
a
band
show with them
lineup.
as well.
Yeah.
Man,
Yeah,
that's-
that was actually all time. But thinking
But
back
yeah.
to that it makes me die inside a little bit because
It was like a
the last
toy
time I did actually listen to that
electronic
recording, it was just so diabolically bad. And I do remember prior to the show, we were all very under rehearsed. I was especially stressed as well because what was the one beat? Get Like It or something. I had to like simplify the Get Like It groove. And I just,
Well, the thing was,
oh man,
up until then, we hadn't really played with like production live. We'd
Yeah,
always played,
yeah.
like in our previous bands in high school, was always, and then in the conservatorium, everything we were playing was always played live. You know,
Yeah.
in a duo or in a trio or in like a 4-piece or 5-piece. And so what we were trying to do was, because we were writing all this music, Toby, Joe and Jai had been writing music prior to me even coming back up to Byron, had been writing music like in the box, this very like new produced electronic sound that they were experimenting with. So then when we came to this like, oh, let's play live, like we know how to play live. We did that for like 5 years before. That'll be easy. But what he didn't realize is like all that production stuff, when you transfer it to live, how the fuck does that work? Like,
Yeah.
how do you
that was
make...
like.
So we're
the
like, oh,
learning
that's
curve.
easy. We'll just, launch them off these pads.
Oh.
But then how do we keep Thorn and the rest of us locked
In
to that
time.
grid? So
We
we've
had
got
like,
this-
so we were using like Apple headphones.
Yeah,
and, like
bro,
just had a
remember
click track in there.
like
It was
$12
it was even-
headphones with there was
Yeah,
no-
it was these $12 little shitty Samsung headphone things. They were blue or something.
and we had remember
And they
that
were like-
tiny little headphone amp that we had,
And I had a
the
tiny
wired-
Behringer headphone thing connected to my iPhone. And I would
With a click track.
launch the click track off that.
No, was it really?
Yeah.
And that's what it was. Yeah, I
Oh
was
my
launching the
God.
click track from my iPhone. It was going through this tiny little silver Behringer thing.
Yeah.
And Joe's over there with this like Yamaha electric drum kit.
it was literally collapsing on stage while he was playing it. He was like playing it, collapsing, and then it was just falling in on itself. But look, to give us credit, to be fair, I'm not going to say that we were the first band to try and like get this hybrid electronic live setup going.
We were-
but
I feel like we were early.
we were early enough that every sound guy for the first couple of years of our gigs was just like,
no
what the
idea
fuck are you guys doing?
Oh, yeah,
Like,
they were very
what is this
confused.
laptop running your guitars?
Yeah,
and what is
yeah.
this thing? Like, that? It was just really, really confusing for a while. I think
did
now
come a
it's
long
like
way,
it's pretty much what every band usually does.
Yeah.
Just to kind of get a cleaner, controlled sound, no noise on stage. But man, at the time, like, we didn't really know what we were doing. Thankfully, we
because
had Sean
we were-
because
we
he
were just
actually
too
knows what's
poor.
going
Yeah.
on.
We
But
just had no money, so
But also
couldn't
we were
afford
using
to have all
like-
the real gear, and we didn't have
Yeah, we were
guitar
using
amps.
soft synths. We were using no amps. Like it was just as much in the box as possible, which was what actually made it kind of difficult in a way as like a beginner.
Yeah.
Because like obviously people have been doing electronic music for 40 years, but like
At this point, we'd been producing
longer.
for like a year or something. Like,
yeah.
we didn't know what we were doing. We were literally just in the deep
But
end trying to swim.
But it also did make sense in terms of touring. So like it saved us a lot of hassle without having to carry around fucking valve amps and
Yeah, for
especially
sure.
bass
We
amps.
did use it a
like-
little bit in the beginning. I was using
Yeah.
but anyway.
You had an
but
amp for a
it
while,
saved us a lot.
didn't
Yeah, that thing was like 40 kilos, that amp.
Yeah. But yeah, we tried a lot of different things. At
But-
one stage, Thorn was experimenting with electronic kick pedals instead of like live kick pedals, so we didn't have to travel with the whole drum kit.
First
We
European.
kind of went
one,
through
yeah.
tried it. We did. It was literally like
Lots of
what do you call it,
evolution.
like learning by doing.
Yeah,
sort of thing.
And I think there'll be more evolution as well. Like I think for the next record, if we go back to live performances and touring, for the next record, I think there'll be like another sort of evolution of our live setup to an extent. I will be changing my stuff a little bit, I think.
Yeah. Well, even like the last one, it changed. Like you had an extra 2 or 3 freaking hard synths.
It's just going to be a synth calypso.
Now I got a Moog on stage, whereas previously I'd use Joe's thing, would switch over, and it was always like a hassle because it was like to fuck up your whole stage thing.
I want to get like a percussion rack so that I don't have to trek over to Thorn's drum kit.
Back to day one, bro. What do you mean?
That's what it was.
The final evolution is the beginning, bro.
Oh, it's full circle.
It's gonna bring the toy to
Isn't that what it is? Infinity is just like
a circle.
I mean, but in a way, ultimately, that is the thing, because I could imagine in a few years' time, if we do manage to get off the cusp, which is kind of ironic as well, because we've sort of been on the cusp for like the last 7 years. My girlfriend always gives me shit about this, because from when Joe and I first met her, we were both like, yeah, Torah's a thing. We're like on the cusp. We're nearly going to make it. And we've just literally been on the cusp now for our entire careers. But what's interesting about being on the cusp, let me just say, is it's like there's limitless potential being on the cusp.
You still do whatever the fuck you want.
You haven't made it, but you haven't like not made it, and you're not like famous, but you're not unknown, and so you're just there's possibilities of just waiting. But so maybe the cusp is the best place to be.
Maybe that's the final.
How do you actually know when you've made it? Because when you have made it, you're gonna be like having bigger visions for yourself, and so you still feel like you haven't made it.
Yeah, it's just a human condition, really.
Like 5 years ago, looking at where we are now, we would probably consider it as like we made it.
Yeah, for sure.
It just depends if you're like just considering live big shows as like the end goal, then we probably haven't made it.
We haven't sold out.
Look at streaming
anything
and streaming revenues and whatnot. Then like I think 5 years ago, we would have considered like, oh yeah, like that is where we want to be, sort of thing.
Yeah.
So it depends what you're using to sort of like gauge yourself.
But what I was actually going to say before I diverged is that we started out very electronic, but I would imagine that when we're playing like the ultimate perfect show, we probably will actually be using valve amps and all of the stuff, because you can't really mimic some of the sound that you get from these amplifiers. Like there's a reason why they just sound so fucking good, and like probably have a Steinway on stage or like whatever, because a little soft synth is just not gonna quite have that same oomph. And so I think the whole thing is pretty cyclic, but I do appreciate that we are so agile and dynamic and versatile in how we can actually pull our stuff together. And so I think we got to pat ourselves on the back for that sometimes, because we're pretty, what's the word? Ingenious?
Innovative?
I don't know about that.
Ingenuity? Ingenuity?
Fucking geniuses.
No, like
boys.
I think we're innovative. Like whenever we have like new ideas, we just like start implementing them and figuring out like, okay, how can we make this work in our live set? Oh, we need to buy this bit of gear. Oh, what's the most economical bit of gear that can do this thing? And then we kind of get by off like pretty small budgets, considering like
for sure.
So
no, it's pretty awesome.
Actually, that leads into a pretty cool idea for maybe listeners, that maybe musicians or people who are going into a live sphere, either live or in studio, is maybe maybe they're interested in, not necessarily we'll talk about it now, but like maybe some of the gear that we use, or if they're looking to like buy microphones and they want, I don't know,
they want to know what
some
we
sort
use
of like
for
help with like what they should use, or if they're looking as like a vocalist, what vocals, like what microphone should they be going for, or preamps, or keyboards, or synths, or Moogs, Dave Smiths, whatever.
Well, I would also love.
Maybe that's a cool topic for people to, they can message in and be like, hey, next episode, can you please talk about your favorite bits of gear, or what do you recommend for this sort of thing?
Yeah.
Sure. Or what don't to buy, like.
Yeah,
definitely USB hubs need like a global fucking overhaul.
Sustain pedals.
Sustain pedals and USB hubs are like,
whoever the fuck is making sustain pedals and USB hubs, straight to jail.
Like, what the fuck?
Straight to jail.
Speaking of dodgy USB hubs, we had the worst experience. We were in Melbourne supporting Oh Wonder at the Forum Theatre. I think that's what it's called. It's like 2,000 people in front of us, packed room. And before the show.
I barely remember that.
Something was
out.
Yeah, like I remember about an hour or two before the show, we're setting up, getting ready for sound check, and then like laptop's not working, something's playing around. We're trying everything just frantically for like an hour or two, calling up managers, getting people to bring bits of like gear. They even brought an extra laptop and like put all of the stuff on the other laptop, set it up, got it ready, and then like we're like, all right, it's all sweet, and we get like a song. No, like I think we get 3 songs into the set, and the laptop just shit itself completely. It just
it was like
made this crunch sound and like
noise.
exploded. Anyway, and it turns out what happened was the USB hub that we were using. Whoever designed it, I don't know
Like
what they thought, but they
something.
basically made it so that the mains power, when you plug that in, that was like feeding back into like the USB bus or something, and fried my motherboard on my computer.
Oh my god!
And and I went and did a bunch of research, and I found basically that other people had the same thing happen to them, and I was fuming. I was like, man, we got to sue this company for like damages and all this shit.
I'm pretty sure I still got that. I think I still have that little
But
USB hub somewhere.
Yeah, I remember it.
Back in Australia. I think I've got it in a drawer somewhere. It's like
Sean,
stashed
why
away.
haven't you just incinerated the fucking thing, man? What are you
I don't know,
talking
because at one
about?
point Joe was going to do a full class action lawsuit or something against him. So it's like, hold on to it. So I was like, okay, I'll hold on to it. So I still got it stashed.
So should we like maybe go into some questions that we've got? Does anyone have some?
Yeah, we do have a few
Thorne,
questions.
you have some, right?
We do. Let me.
We'll
pull
just
them up.
answer some questions that we've been asked.
But also coming back to what Sean was saying, I think whoever's actually watching this should just give feedback. But I think some of our listeners are going to be technically interested in, I don't know, gear, music, stuff, royalties, business, all of that. And then some are probably just going to not be interested. So I do wonder how we maybe can try separate the two.
Look,
Maybe we do
here's what
like
I
a
was
special
thinking.
shorter form podcast, like as well, to just focus on that stuff. Or
I was thinking
But
like
let me
this.
find these questions.
This is like an introductory episode, just to kind of like touch on the kind of range of topics that we'll be exploring in this podcast. But I think what we're going to aim to do is make it so that like each podcast will have a main topic that we'll be touching on, and that will be like in the title, so that people can see, okay, like this one's especially of interest to me. And also, depending on what guests we have on, will also dictate the main topic that we're going to discuss. So, because I think it's really important for us to be able to give the listeners an idea of what to expect from each episode before they commit to watching it. And so,
For sure.
every podcast that I've seen that's successful tends to have like a main topic. Obviously, this introductory episode is very like free flowing, and I like. I want to keep that dynamic of like us just being conversational and natural.
I think it will have a conversational element to it, but yes, of course, we'll have this sort of like main sort of topic that we gravitate the episode around.
Yeah.
There's one that I listened to. I think it's called the mixing music podcast or something. Anyways, these 2 engineers and they have that sort of format. I think they do a bit shorter format. It's about 20 minutes or half an hour for their ones. And then they have like a Patreon where you can pay, and I think they've got like, hour, 2 hour long conversations. But yeah, each of their episodes is normally based around sort of like a main topic, and then you can sort of branch off from there. And then we can also do like a section with questions that week, or I don't know, if there's an album or an artist that you're frothing at the moment that you want to share. We can also touch on that, I guess.
Yeah, well, maybe for these first few, we're just like smashing out the more general stuff, because a lot of the questions that I'm seeing here from people are sort of like asking how we all met, how did we get the name Torah, what's it like writing, what's the writing process like from each member's view.
Well,
also, how does lasting friendship and constant close quarters go? Life on the beach, Byron Bay. Like, I don't know, maybe it's more general and we're getting more specific over time, because I feel like once we've covered these things, like where did the name Torah come from, all of this sort of stuff, we've sort of covered it.
Let's be
like
clear.
It comes out.
Torah didn't mean anything to us when we actually despite what we've
Most
said
time.
in multiple interviews over the years, we've pretty much given different answers for that question over the years. But
Because we didn't fucking know. Like,
the reality
Yes.
is that we just like the sound of the name, and then we later discovered that it meant all kinds of things, like now in Greek, or tiger in Japanese. It's also often people think that we named ourselves Torah after the book, like Torah, the book of Torah. That actually has a H on the end of it, so it's not why we called ourselves Torah. Sorry to disappoint anyone who was hoping that was the case. But yeah, it's literally just a name that we like the sound of. And we thought that it was also, you couldn't tell if it was like an individual or a group. And so we kind of liked that. In the beginning, we didn't really have much like press shots or much like of our image. It was mostly art based. And so it kind of felt like a genderless name that could be like, it could be an individual, or it could be a group, or it could be a girl, or it could be a boy. You don't know. That was kind of like the vibe. But it really didn't mean anything to us.
I mean, in many ways, like you've just got to usually just choose something and just go with it. And then I actually heard an interesting quote from another artist. I forget who it was, but she was basically saying that when you write a song, the moment you release it, it's no longer yours. And this is because every listener or every fan basically will take that song and interpret it in their own special way. And then they kind of form a personal attachment to it. And I think the same thing sort of happens with the name as well, you know, because there's a lot of bands. I mean, the first one that always comes to mind for me is Queens of the Stone Age, which is just like such a strange name for a band. But, you know, like they chose it. I'm sure there's like some reason as to why they did. But nevertheless, it's just like, you know, cool. That's their name. They're now running with it. And that's the thing. And whenever I hear that name, I just am linking back to them. So I think a name can sometimes be super important, but other times it's just whatever it becomes, you know? So I think that's cool. So
I was just stuck, I guess. And I don't think we actually planned on like, when we did stick with Tora, it was kind of like such an early time before we even, you know, started touring or getting like big amounts of players or anything like that. So I don't think we really realized what it was going to turn into at that time. So we're like, Tora, okay, sweet. Good SEO, let's go. And so then we just
it was definitely an improvement.
And I'm pretty sure 100%. I'm pretty sure Joe was like, sweet, SEO is perfect. You know, best thing for SEO. It was like,
there's just a heavy metal band called Tora from Norway. I think we can outcompete them.
There's a few
Toras getting around, but no, that's cool. All right, well that's like the first one, I guess. The other question, fuck.
I would love to, for us to create a space where we're able to share ideas. I already mentioned this, but I don't know if we can set it up in a way where like we have a sound card running into the sound card so that we can like actually use a DAW to kind of show ideas to each other. But I would love that. And I think this could really give people some insight into our creative process, like breaking down how we got certain sounds.
Yeah, but I still think this
doesn't have to be unreleased stuff.
Curricular stuff. Because the other thing is, I was diving into the service we're using now, Riverside, and they don't stream stereo. It's all mono. So you're going to want to try and show something on here, and it's just going to sound so pigeonholed.
Yeah, so each of our channels are all mono channels.
So
it's a stereo,
we might
stereo channel as one, but from your side, Joe, it's just mono.
Input mono. So we'd have to use different services and systems. But also,
we're going to build that stuff out, I think, as well. We're going to try and
that'll
build out some kind of Patreon or Substack at some point. We'll see how that goes, but give years.
Because it would also be really nice to have a little bit more of an intimate space for the people that are interested in actually doing that, where we don't have to feel rushed, and it's like a bit more of a
I think
proper setup.
The ideal for me, the way that I would see that working, and from the experiences I've had, it would be sort of like a masterclass format. So you would do something using Patreon, Substack, or whatever, and then you'd run it as like a bi-weekly or monthly masterclass, and that would be maybe based on production styles or techniques, etc., or like breakdowns, like what Joe's saying. But then it's honed in on like a time that people like link up to, and then you have an audience that's like listening that is really interested in those topics that you're speaking about.
And they can ask questions in real time.
And they can exactly. Then they can interact, and it's less of like this podcast format where it's more us speaking to them. It's more of an interactive version of it.
Totally.
So
I think that would be really nice, and it'll bring us closer to our super fans, like the people who are really interested.
Because I think it's a very niche part of our fan base, or maybe not. Could be super surprised. Maybe there's a lot of people interested in that side of as well, like in terms of like musically.
Yeah, very good.
But yeah, we'll have to work out how to give that to you guys.
Next up, lads, what is the writing process like? This is pretty long form. So maybe this one actually
maybe
goes at the end. That can go for like an entire podcast. So
we can do a whole episode. On
everyone's favorite
album.
album.
Almost at an hour now.
Everyone's favorite album that we've put out.
Oh, wait, our own album?
Our
album.
Like, I believe our favorite album from each member's view.
Okay.
Oh, fuck, I don't know.
I'm guessing it's a Torah album.
That's like asking someone who's the favorite child. That's like a horrible question.
But the thing is, there's always one. Let's be honest.
Is there though? I don't know if there is.
There is.
Because I like each one has its own like vibe. Like
everyone has its own day. This is what I think is like, as a parent, one day you're just going to be so pissed at one of your kids, and then the other day you're going to probably love them to bits. So maybe that is actually like more like what's going on, because maybe on a different day and a different time.
It depends on the day. Yeah, like I would say, for me, the most polished record, like the proudest work in terms of like production value, is a Force Majeure. But I think that it's also, I would say Take a Rest is also like super creative, and it might not be as polished, but like it's kind of got like a different kind of value to it. So I can't decide, but I would say that my least favorite one is the first EP that we put out.
Okay, well, let's.
Dude, I only just recently listened to those again. I can't remember what I was doing. I was digging through something, and I was listening, and I was like, God damn! Like, it's not bad, but it's just like
just
the
a whole
quality
different vibe,
and like
man.
So
the product, like everything is
sample
so
selection and
freaking
mixing.
It's like one-dimensional.
What the fuck is this?
That's so funny.
It's wild.
But there's a mood to
And
it.
it's just hard to understand that people actually listened to that and thought like, oh yeah, this is cool. Like,
Bro, I've still got some of my friends, and they're like, some of their favorite songs are on those
Favorite
first
songs,
two
yeah. I mean,
EPs,
because people don't really give it, like, a lot of people just connect with a certain thing, and that relationship builds over time. It's like a person you know for a long time. You might, maybe it's not like the best person, but you love them to bits, and you have a huge history with them, and that's why they might like that song the most.
for sure.
And
And
doesn't mean
also
it's the
the
best
mood
song,
they were
but-
in. It
When
might
they-
have been
yeah.
a certain thing that got them through a specific difficult time, and that like has a different like sentimental value that like you can't replace with, no matter how good a new song might be. It just doesn't have the same place in their heart. So I get that, but when I listen back, I'm like, how did we think that this was like actually good enough to release?
Incredible. It's incredible, and to get us enough traction for us to like actually start playing shows and touring in Australia and the rest of the world.
That's the moral of the story, is for all you creatives out there.
Just put some shit out.
Everyone who's like destroying themselves with self-doubt.
Just
Being an artist
do it.
is a battle between having an inflated ego and being crippled by self-doubt. And you're constantly on this roller coaster between the two. You got to somehow try and find yourself in the middle, but at the end of the day, people are going to appreciate the fact that you even expressed yourself, and there's going to be people out there who get value from things that you think could be thrown in the bin. Prime example of that is the night before we finished our first EP, our second EP. We were debating whether or not we should release the song Gigantic, and we were almost going to throw it in the bin. Toby was like, I'm not going to be in this band if we release this track, and we had like a big spaff about it, and Sean and I managed to convince him that it was a good idea. And it turned out to be like one of like pretty much our first breakthrough track, which got remixed by Galen Matthias and ended up going viral on SoundCloud. And so like it goes to show that you have to just put stuff out there, and not be too attached, because at the end of the day, the ideas don't really belong to you, they belong to everyone. Like they just came through you, and it's really your duty as the artist to share that with the world and let other people benefit from the therapeutic element of the track or of the art that you've made, because you've healed yourself through making it, and someone else is going to heal themselves.
You're just a vessel, really.
100%.
You're like a vessel for the communication of certain frequencies, and if you can, have like drop your ego a little bit and let that be released into the world, like you say, it's sort of almost your duty to do so, because you're privileged enough to have that type of creative thinking and the tools perhaps, or the resources to be able to create that in an interesting way. But that idea might not actually be yours. It might be something that you pulled from an experience that you had with a stranger on the street, and without that stranger you wouldn't have had the song. And so in a way it's sort of like almost silly to say like, oh, this is my song, but really it's like just a amalgamation of all these different experiences that you've had and have been inspired by various people throughout your life. And so to your point, it's like it's kind of your duty to share that, and you'll find that the stuff that you think is not going to do well will often do the best. And I've definitely experienced that a lot.
Remember Too Little on Take a Rest. We were
just
like
a random interlude track, kind of.
we didn't think anything
20
of
million
it.
players.
But there's actually a really good book on this for anyone that's interested. It's called The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield. Or Stephen Pressfield, something like this. But it touches on exactly what Joe was just talking about how there's like some sort of connection to the divine, quote unquote, wherein, we kind of are just channeling a lot of the stuff. Because ultimately, as humans, we're basically borrowed. Like everything that I am is just like borrowed from different people around and things that I see. And then it basically just forms like a unique sort of makeup. But
I almost feel like ideas could be viewed as like a natural resource that.
Still got you, Joe.
Yeah, you're still here.
Yeah, what's up, Joe?
Oh no, something's happened.
You think he dropped off?
He's like, oh,
He looks so sad. Oh, that's amazing.
oh no.
Joe.
But anyway, we can probably move on. But that's definitely a good point. It's like,
I think we can probably even just, like, we've hit an hour now. I don't know if you guys are happy to, if you want to continue.
Yeah, well, let's just finish off these questions. I'm still waiting for an answer from Jai and from you, Sean, about your favorite Torah album.
Oh, right. I like Take a Rest. I think, it's like children. You like different ones on different days in a way. Not that I have children. But I think Take a Rest has like a freedom to it that like the other albums kind of like tightened up on. It also has more creative sort of opinions in the mix, I would say. And I think there's like a very diverse array of interesting ideas in that record, and just the way we wrote it as well, like up on like a mountain, kind of like all together just in this house, like kind of a ghetto setup, but like also just our first kind of bit of work that sounds semi-polished. I think it was sort of like the point for us where like we actually we're going to make this a real thing, like when we put that album out, that was like the marker for us to be like, okay, we're going to take this seriously, and we're going to like roll with this as a project, and Torah is like going to be sort of like the main thing in our lives. And that's why it's sort of like is important for me, is because it kind of marks that time for us.
And then Toby,
I love them all.
Toby was like, fuck this, I'm out. Can't be doing it.
Well, then after that, we just, we did a fuckload of touring, just burnt ourselves.
That's pretty insane.
Goodly. I don't know. For me, Take a Rest. I'm similar to like what Joe and Jai said in terms of like the creativity on it. It had like a lot of experimental sounds and like a lot of sampling. I remember like I remember going out and spending like hours just recording shit on these like portable Zoom recorders, like cats purring and washing machines winding down and fucking cactus spikes and flies in the garden and like throwing rocks in like a pond. So there's a lot of this like organic self-sampling, and we got 2 Joes now. This organic self-sampling, which I think in later years, especially on the last album, Force Majeure, because we were living in the city, I think we had like a lot of less of our self-sampling organic sounds. We relied on, in terms of samples, we relied heavily on like sample packages and things like that, which was fine, but it gave it a completely different sound.
Yeah.
But I do love the new album for the last album, Force Majeure, because of the crispiness of it. Like, it really sounds more like a studio album to me. Like, Take a Rest is still polished and still produced really well, but it sounds much more like you can hear more or less that it's been recorded in like a living room. Whereas for me, Force Majeure sounds like it's a studio, much more closer to a studio album.
I mean, we can't forget Can't Buy the Mood either. It's a great record. I think there's like some key tracks on there.
Yeah.
But it's sort of like we have 3 out now, and we'll need to write a 4th.
I think it's just
soon,
a constant evolution. Maybe the next one will be like a weird amalgamation of like the new crispy thing, and then
the first record kind of.
And the first record sort of organicness. Maybe we'll do this whole infinity.
Yeah, well,
snake eating its own tail thing we've been talking about.
Because I think that there's a beauty to simplification as well, and I think doing more with less is ultimately what like a really good craftsman figures out. Because a lot of the music that I've been listening to, even in recent weeks, it just absolutely slaps, and there's just so little going on. And I think that there's a confidence in that, you know, if you're a producer or a musician and you're like, wow, this bit just needs to have vocals and like this drum beat or whatever's going on. It's like you're not trying to hide or disguise your insecurities or your uncertainties with too many layers.
With flowers.
It's just like, bam, this is gonna slap, and that's what's going on there. And I think that's definitely like a pretty inspiring characteristic that I've been noticing over the last few weeks. But that's cool. I would personally say that I think actually Can't Buy the Mood was probably my favorite in terms of just how the entire composition, even the visual side of things, came together. I also labored for like at least a month on the album artwork on that thing. It was just like, I just went way overboard until there's like this
the fucking
crazy
booklet and everything,
like
the back,
I don't know, 12-page booklet or some shit, man. That thing was fucking intense. But very, very stoked in the outcome anyway.
And also the content creation of that was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Doing that photo shoot and
working with Lumini Collection.
Yeah. It was so much fun.
No, it's really cool.
Yeah, that was really cool.
So
see, that's what I'm saying. It's fucking impossible. Like, you say one thing, one of your kids, you know, shits on the floor, but the other one yells at night. So like,
something like that.
God.
All right, last question, guys.
There's pros and cons to both of them.
Last question.
All of them. All three.
Okay, so we've got 3 questions here. I'll float them all, and you guys can kind of decide which one. So the first one is lasting friendship in constant close quarters. Second one is crypto for dummies, and the third one is life on the beach, i.e. Byron Bay culture, social norms, their foods, etc. So I think crypto. I think we do that later.
We'll speak about it, crypto. Like we are all obsessed, but we won't go there now at the tail end of an episode. I wouldn't mind touching on like, you know, Byron and the way that we were brought up there, and sort of like how that compares to us now living all over the place. Because I know from my experience, like kind of the first time moving out of home properly, like at least long term, like I'd done so much traveling with you boys, also done a lot of traveling for other work that I do, or since I was 16 basically. But the first time proper getting my own apartment long term would be when we all moved to Amsterdam at the beginning of COVID. It was March 2020. We flew over. We knew what was going down, but we did it anyway.
Hey, we didn't know the full extent,
it's just,
bro. That is to be fair.
Yeah, we didn't know what was going to happen, really.
Yeah,
but
we got fucking sideboard.
Fucked up.
Yeah.
Anyway.
But, you know, force majeure came out of it. But my point is that, like, learning the differences, like, from experience between the cultures that like you grew up in and what you're currently living in has just been a really interesting experience. And it's like, it's always an incredible learning curve, you know, finding yourself in a new culture and understanding the intricacies and starting to pick up all these little new bits of inspiration or things that you don't like or things that you're struggling with. And, you naturally compare that to your upbringing. And I do want to just say that, like, for people who are constantly doubting their own situations, there is an incredible beauty to, like, your own community as well, and like where you did grow up. And like, a lot of people will go back after traveling for such a long time. They'll go back to their original community because, like, that's the place that they feel they connect with best. And I will just say that, like, with all the places I've lived, in Tokyo, in Barcelona, in Amsterdam, different cities through Europe, random places in Germany, it's like, it always sort of, one thing that you miss is like the sense of community that you kind of have at home. And I think that does develop over years of living somewhere, but it takes a really long time, and you have to have a commitment to the place to really like build that up. And so for people who are thinking about wanting to get out of their hometown, just remember to appreciate that your hometown can be having this incredible sort of essence to it. And I think Byron, to the question, is a great example of that, because it is very hard to beat in many ways. It's super creative, and it's a beautiful place, beautiful like morals and good people, and yeah, it's where we all grew up. And so yeah, it's an amazing place. And I think that I've definitely been grappling with the fact over the last few months of just like all these new places, and just trying to like find community there is just takes so long, and it's so much work, language barriers, whatever. But I miss home, and I'm excited to be back there for a couple months and reconvene with everyone.
So, beaches, cruising around Watergoes, cruising around the pass.
Yeah, planning to be in Byron. But anyway, I went on a little tangent there. Sorry.
Well, I mean,
you guys can go ahead.
No, I agree. There's like a very, very special attachment to the place. Because like my formative years, of course, growing up there, and I think being young in a place like Byron, where you have the freedom, you have the nature, you do have a really beautiful community of people as well. Everyone's very open-minded. It is a very, very special place to grow up, because you're feeling very nurtured, and I think also because it's a fairly small community, a fairly small town as well. Everyone kind of knows everyone. Some shit goes down, but it's not like it's nothing crazy, nothing I would expect that would happen if you were growing up in like New York City or whatever. And so I think, at least for me, it will always have this special place, but at the same time, I feel, at least when I was there last, I had kind of outgrown the place a little bit. Not to say that I don't love my friends and everything and all the people that are still there, but I think if you're really trying to build something and you're trying to grow as a person, you sort of have to leave the nest at some point. And I think there was, but
then coming back can be a really beautiful experience as well, if you need that.
Yeah, totally. And so I probably will try and go back soon at some point. At least at this stage, I'm not feeling like a very strong calling to kind of get back there. But it's not to say that it's not a thing. Like I could imagine myself retiring there at some point, just like having a little base, having a little setup. It's a really, really good spot. But yeah, I think, at least, that's where I'm at. I don't know. What about you, Shawnee?
Yeah, I think one of the key things I miss from there is like, and maybe it's a bit in terms of like the culture and the upbringing of that area is like the connection to nature, not only the beach, but also like the hinterland and the rainforests,
waterfalls, the whole thing.
National parks and waterfalls, and this like really sense.
I didn't realize how much
Garden
that
of
was
Eden
important
sort of shit.
To me.
Yeah, and like as much as I love living in Europe and overseas and traveling, and how much you sort of grow doing that and really testing yourself, especially being in places like Amsterdam or in Berlin or in Barcelona, where there's all these different language barriers and culture barriers that you're having to overcome, like Jai was saying, and also finding your new community and your new sense of like home or friendships or jobs or whatever it may be. You grow so much from that, but one of the things I keep like sort of missing out on, or feeling like I'm missing, is that connection to nature. And it's not even just like the surfing. Like, yeah, I love surfing. Everyone always says like, oh, don't you miss surfing? Like, you know, Aussie that surfs and now you live in, you know, Berlin. Like, what the fuck are you doing?
Yeah.
And yeah, I do. But I think it's not even just that. It's even just the fact of going for a walk on the beach or going for a walk in nature, just taking your fucking shoes off. And
yeah, because there's space, hey? And there's this feeling of like everything's very unexplored. The one thing that I can't get away from in Europe is that it feels like every tree is accounted for and every lawn has been mowed and like every little piece of that land has been so thoroughly explored throughout human history. Whereas, you know, in Australia, you can drive for half an hour and you probably can be in a rainforest where a human hasn't actually set foot in like thousands of years. And there's something about that where it's humbling, but it's also really beautiful because I think as humans, we sometimes forget how important a connection to nature is.
So important.
Yeah.
What about you, Joe? Damn, he got rugged.
He gone.
Yeah, he never made it to Bayern. That's all right. They didn't let him in.
When he got
I think Joe is gonna say though, like he likes the hustle and bustle. He likes the city. He likes all of that. I mean, he definitely enjoys nature, but the guy won't get in the water. Like you'd be hard pressed to get him out to the beach. He doesn't nothing.
No beach.
Like
no
I think he likes nature, but it's hard to get him out on a hike or it's hard to get him to the beach. That kind of thing. Like I think he likes the city. He likes social connection.
Yeah.
That's all. Like Joe's about that. So.
Yeah, man, I'm so jealous I'm not going back this summer. It'd be so lush. But anyway, there's snow here in Berlin, so that's one thing to look forward to.
Yeah, I would love to go snowboarding. That's like, oh man, we all have so many like,
dude, that's
little
the weirdest thing
is that we can talk about on
is
this.
that Toby can't even go snowboarding because the lifts and stuff aren't even open till December.
Oh, what?
How crazy is that in Switzerland?
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, what the fuck?
Apparently, like they only open the resorts now. I think it's the first week of December or something.
Well, I don't know if Joe's coming back.
Pretty fucking late.
Shit. All right. Well,
maybe Joe's just gone.
Maybe we can call it now. I mean, we're at like 1 hour 20. That's pretty solid. I mean,
it's a good,
I think
lengthy goodness.
Moving forward, we can also just keep things flexible. Like, if we want to end earlier or go longer, I think that's fine as well. I don't think we need to predefine any time. But yeah,
the listeners can let us know if they just want us to, you know.
But yeah, like, subscribe, and follow us for more Tora podcasting. All of that good stuff. But
make sure you fucking do that.
Yeah, no, I think just in general, really happy to be doing this with you guys. I think it's like a really good step in the right direction.
Yeah.
And yeah, just looking forward to continuing. I think we should continue to do weekly, personally, if we can.
Yeah, we will try and do weekly.
Cool.
But also just send us like questions. Just give us like some, like we have plenty to talk about. Don't get me wrong. Like we can just ramble, but like if you guys want more format, send us those questions and we can answer those or touch on certain subjects, even if it's not related to us or music, just stuff that you want to hear us talk about as well, because we have such a broad array of interests and like between us there's like probably 30 hobbies that we all love. So like anything that you like, we can probably touch on it, you know. So
Make it happen. Well, all the best. Much love, guys, and much love to everyone listening and watching.
Thanks for listening, everyone, and thanks for the chat, boys.
We'll catch you next time.
And until then,
ciao. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Breathing under pressure for a pink sky, wishing out for wet eyes.